Uh, yeah, yeah, uh.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Press Coverage here live on the Going for Two Live Network. I am your host, Kyle Senra, and joining me as my guest for this episode is Andrew Erickson. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Kyle, great to be here. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm happy to chop it up with you.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed my experience meeting you at the expo, the very first expo back in 2019. And I've followed you since, listened to a lot of your podcasts since then, and really impressed with how you've grown. And you can see the Fantasy Pros background in the background. Once again, congrats on getting that position you've had for a little bit now, and we'll touch on that a little bit later. But it's great to have you on to press coverage.
Yeah, no, I'm super excited to be here. One of my old stomping grounds. So I'm ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry. Yeah, I guess so. I guess the first thing. Oh yeah, there you go. I was waiting for Jamie. It was weird that Jamie wasn't in the chat, and then suddenly he was there. I was thrown off. But yeah, Jamie's here, rocking with us, and of course, anyone who wants to join the conversation as well can do so on the Going for Two Live YouTube page. We're also on Facebook, Twitch as well. See videos on Twitter or X. But yeah, head over to those other platforms in order for us to see your comments, so you can interact. Yeah, Jamie, I've had two great guests so far this season. This is the second episode of season 4. Jamie, of course, joining as the guest for the last episode, which is fantastic. But yeah, certainly excited for this conversation as well. And I guess before we get started, I'll throw in the pay the bills, throw in the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. If you haven't paid your bills with winning on Underdog Fantasy, or lost a lot of money losing in best ball drafts, the fun of drafting, though, right? That's the experience you're paying for, and you can get access to Underdog Fantasy at a bit of a, I would say, reduced rate, but an extra bonus, and that is a $100 deposit match. Again, up to $100 using the promo code GF2. So if you're a new user to Underdog Fantasy, you can either use our promo code GF2 or scan the QR code as you see on screen. And from there, we are going to head over to the first question. And the first question of press coverage is always, we start with the starting. And so where do sports start with you, Andrew? What were your first sports memories?
First sports memories, a blanket over my head. Adam Vinatieri coming in to make the kick for the Patriots against the St. Louis Rams at the time in the Super Bowl in 2001, 2002. That's my first memory, really, just like watching that Super Bowl with my parents, being really stressed out, thinking that Adam Vinatieri was going to miss it, having no other context about what else is going on. But growing up, Boston sports were really big in my household from the Patriots. My parents put that on me when I was very young to be a Patriots fan, which was not great to start. But then obviously we got Tom Brady, and now we're all privileged, and now all Patriots fans complain. That's basically all we do now. So, Patriots, Red Sox, 2004 Red Sox. That was a really fun time to be like someone that was like playing baseball and watching baseball, like the Red Sox, Yankees rivalries, the players on those teams, like breaking the curse, like so much fun growing up with Boston sports. And then 2007, the Patriots, the team that the year they went undefeated, obviously lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl, but that was the first year I ever played fantasy football. So that really like unlocked another element to the game. And for the first time ever, I felt like invested in the team, like outside of just the games. It's like, oh, like what are they going to do in the offseason? Like when you're invested in the team that way. So those are kind of like the three that kind of stick out the most to me when I'm thinking back about my sports memories, aside from playing different sports as a fan. Really, the Patriots and the Red Sox were kind of the two things that I grew up with. And now not so much with the Red Sox. It's really just mostly Patriots, especially with my job being focused on football. But the Patriots aren't good anymore. So it's like really easy to just be an analyst and be like, yep, they're bad. Let's get better versus, oh, I want my team to win. It doesn't really matter as much. So yeah, that's kind of where I got my start.
Yeah, I gotta complain as a Packers fan. Now we're competitive all of a sudden. I gotta stress about it. It's the worst, apparently. No, it's great. It's awesome. Sorry to the fan bases that don't compete. Vikings. But yes, I guess it's interesting that championships, right? Those seem to ring true. If you've seen your team experience it, you'll sort of stick to those memories more than any other. And I guess a period of 2-3 years saw quite a few Patriots Red Sox championships.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about like you remember what you were doing, you remember the people you were with when you were watching it, like the 28-3 Falcons game. I remember where we watched that. I remember watching the Seahawks Patriots game that was overseas in London at a bar. Like I was 19 years old. Like it's like craziness like going on. People were shouting that had no like stake in the game whatsoever. Like they're just there because they're like, oh, the Super Bowl's on. It's like 2 a.m. Like let's party. Like they didn't care who won. But yeah, those championship runs are something that those memories I would never trade for anything.
Were you in Canada drinking in a bar at 19?
Oh, it was in London. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you said 2 a.m., I figured, okay, there's not an east enough time zone in Canada that would make sense. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, well, congrats on the trip to London, and congrats on it being productive and the Patriots still winning. Right down to the wire, too, with that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right, JB. Try being a Browns fan. I kind of don't want to be honest. I know
No,
that a
the
lot of people would.
Browns is depressing, especially like when you think you finally got your quarterback and it's Deshaun Watson and like, good God.
Well, I mean, I felt like a lot of people thought they had the quarterback before that too, with Baker Mayfield, and who knows how that'll turn out. And yeah, I guess to Jamie's comment though, that an Andrew Erickson versus a Debro cage match would be interesting. He seems to have faith in you, and Jamie does love to, go on underdog fantasy, do best ball drafts, and put his money where his mouth is. So he's a reputable source.
Yeah, I mean, we did a like fantasy cage match a couple years ago. I think it was our first year at Fantasy Pros where we were arguing Brees Hall versus Ken Walker as like the RB1 of that class. And I mean, both the guys have been pretty good, I think, for the most part. But I mean, just looking at underdog rankings right now, Brees Hall's in round 1 and Ken Walker is not. So I'll take that as a W.
Yeah, good job. I was definitely on the Ken Walker train, so I'll accept the loss there. I was on the before they drafted Charbonnet that he was the Dynasty RB1, and that just did. One draft pick just sunk that ranking.
Yeah,
It made me look
see,
like
we're gonna get a lot of those feelings during this draft too. That's gonna happen. Get a couple sunk drafts.
Yeah, I wouldn't. It's not my first time I'll look foolish. Certainly, probably won't be the last. I'll try not to be, but it'll still happen. And apparently, Debro would fight dirty, which does that mean he gets a good chance at winning? I don't know. I suppose part of me says, "Oh, I hope we find out," but I hope we don't find out. I don't like violence, although I love football, so I'm pretty weird. But yeah, we all love football, and transitioning with your last comment from football to fantasy football, you said 2007 was your first season playing fantasy. So any Randy Moss that year to really give you the itch?
No, my team was really bad because it was the first time playing. Like I drafted like the Bears defense like first because I thought, oh, like they were so good in 2006. Like this is elite defense. Like this is like this is like the first thing you teach people in fantasy football is like don't ever draft defense like at all. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna draft one first. I drafted defense, Lawrence Maroney, homer pick as a horrible running back, and Reggie Bush. Those were my first 3 picks. And I had like Matt Leinart. The only good pick I ever made, and I made it by accident. I drafted Calvin Johnson because I thought he was Chad Johnson. But it ended up being it was like Calvin Johnson's like true like first like breakout season when he really like because at the time like he was still in Detroit, he like no good, like the quarterbacks were horrible. So he hadn't had that like premier season yet, but 2007 he kind of finally turned things around and started putting up big numbers, and that was like the one pick I had. And every time everyone tried to trade for him, I was like, no, like this is my guy. Like this is Calvin. I can't move away from him. So the one thing I do also remember from that draft was my aunt. Again, very inexperienced fantasy league. My aunt drafted Tom Brady like first overall, and we're all like making fun of her. Like, oh, like I mean, because I couldn't make fun of the guy who picked the defense first, right? So we're making fun of the lady that picked quarterback first. Tom Brady like literally scored more points than anybody. like it wasn't, and it wasn't even close. So
yeah, even with one QB draft strategy, that would have worked out. So
yeah.
So I guess so yeah, you mentioned your aunt was in there, so family league and wanting to do a family activity. Like who in your family approached you about that, or who had the idea? Like was this a league that existed before
I don't think
2007?
so. No, I think it was so like I shared the team with my dad because kind of like introducing it to me. But I think yeah, my dad and my aunts and uncles must have just like, hey, like we should do like a fantasy league because they're all like football fans. So I remember like the draft we had at my aunt's house, and it was an in-house draft, like not using computers. I don't remember. I think it was on CBS, And yeah, I just remember it being a ton of fun. And then during the season, me and my dad like would roster the teams together. We'd make waiver wire transactions together. I remember we were very projections based. We were like, all right, how do we get the most points? So we would like make very aggressive like waiver claims because like this guy was projected to score like 0.2 more points than the other guy, which again to this like the projections don't mean anything. Like they're very loose in terms of like the projections. Like I would they're hardly something I look at all anymore. But at the time, I thought it was gold. I was like, oh my god, like I gotta have the guy with the most projected points. Like this is easy. Um,
Someone
but
else's maybe not the site projections, but if you've got a reputable source that you
yeah,
believe in their projections, that seems like yeah, we definitely want that edge. But
yeah,
if using the same
exactly.
projections as everyone else,
Yeah,
there's
that's like not optimal, but that was something I was always like very gun ho on. I was like, all right, no, we need to have the most projected points. Even if we have to cut this guy, I don't care. And then the one waiver wire pickup I made that was like super key. I remember my uncle was really pissed about it because the guy had sucked on his team. He dropped him and I picked him up and then he was just turned into a monster. Was Marquise Colston in 2007. So the former 7th round pick, tight end, converted wide receiver for Drew Brees and the Saints. I don't know. He just turned into a monster and I was like sick.
and
My
you would
uncle
have
was
had the
living
Colston Reggie Bush stack.
exactly. The Saints stack before stacking was even cool. So, you know, I was years ahead.
Revolutionary.
I was light years ahead. I was destined to be in this role that I have now, essentially.
Well, again, you can tell your podcast host that's like two perfect transitions. This one will actually capture it though, and say, yeah, now that you're with Fantasy Pros, take us back to how you started in fantasy football content creation and how it's led you to your position now.
Yeah, so I graduated college in 2016, and after that, I was just kind of looking for a job. I had a marketing degree, so in the downtime, I would do fantasy research because I thought it was fun. I had like a WordPress website that I just like started on my own. It's like Fantasy Football Master or something like that, and I would just like kind of write stuff like for no reason, just kind of like for myself to kind of just. It was like at the time, it was like David Johnson, Todd Gurley, like those were like the top tier Le'Veon Bell, like those were the top tier running backs I talked about like those types of running backs. And then eventually I met Mitchell Renz, who I worked with in my real life job at the time in 2017, and he introduced me to Gridiron Experts as a website where you could write fantasy articles. I was like, oh, this is cool. It's like, yeah, like I'll help you get settled, like set up. I'll connect you with the owner of the site, Mike Riggs, and that's how I kind of landed my first like fantasy gig. And I remember to this day, the first fantasy article I ever wrote was Julius Thomas when he was, I think, either traded or signed with the Miami Dolphins. And I was like, this is not a good landing spot for him. And I was right. So I was on top of the world. Julius Thomas was a bust on Miami. I mean, Julius Thomas basically had one good season with Denver. I mean, he caught like 18 touchdowns, and I don't think he did everything. He did not. I don't think he did anything else since that. But I was
The
right.
year where Peyton Manning threw like
Oh yeah,
55, right? So
yeah,
of course he
yeah.
scored
Yeah, when
50.
Peyton Manning threw 7 touchdowns in like the season opener, it's like, oh my god,
Yeah, that's true.
this guy's back. So yeah, that was the first article I wrote for Gridiron Experts, and then from there, I just kind of fell in love with doing content from a written perspective. So I tried to pick up other gigs. So Full Press Coverage was a site that I wrote for, Gridiron Experts, and then Fantasy Data as I started to get more and more involved with fantasy content, and eventually I landed my first full-time job 4 years ago, really in the height of COVID in 2020 with PFF, which I had been doing work for, not specifically fantasy, but like PFF, like charting. Like I had been doing some of that stuff for them because I just wanted to get my foot in the door with a company that I knew had an opportunity for more. So that's what I did with PFF. And then the last 2 years, I've been lucky enough to be at Fantasy Pro. So that's kind of my story of where I started basically, yeah, since 2016, 2017. So not quite to 10 years yet, but kind of getting up there as I approach my age 30 season here. In May, I'll be turning 30. I saw my first white hair the other day in the mirror, so that was very depressing. But yeah, starting to get old, but I'm still kicking.
Yeah, I can see quite a few on this beard now. No, I'll keep it. But yeah, the downside of the beard is more spots to see. The hat won't cover it all. That's okay. Embrace it. Yeah, full press coverage. I'm writing there and podcasting there. I don't think, believe by the time I joined, you had already moved on. But it's funny that when we met at the very first Fantasy Football Expo, you mentioned a few things. Like I remember, thought I was pretty sure you mentioned the PFF charting. So when you said it now, it definitely rung the bell. And then the fact that you were at full press coverage and we're have that commonality of both having worked for Ian Glendon. So shout out to Ian. Also shout out to Jeff for this show too. So my two bosses, I guess. gotta support both. And yeah, well, you know what? And to be fair, maybe that's my time for a good transition because Ian and Jeff have both been very influential on me. But Andrew, who have been some of the biggest influences in your life? And this doesn't have to necessarily just be about fantasy football, although we do find fantasy football important. It's a big part of our lives.
Yeah, so again, I mentioned at the top, Mitchell Renz was someone that introduced me to like fantasy as like a content space. Like he invited me to my first Twitter share group for fantasy football, which was, I mean, totally bizarre. It was like people just like write articles and share them in here. So like I don't even know if any of those people exist anymore. Don't know, but whatever. So shout out to him. Mike Riggs was the first person that obviously was able to land me a job with Gridiron Experts, my first place that I wrote articles. So always thankful for those guys' influences on where I've made my career at this point. On my parents, I mentioned them, playing in a fantasy league with my dad was very influential. My mom is actually like the more diehard football fan out of my mom and dad. So she's beat it into me to be a Patriots fan. And as it's been tough for the last couple of years, I mean, obviously being into football has obviously made it this a dream come true for me. Like to be full time in the industry, working and talking about fantasy football is my career. Like that's something that I'm just truly blessed to do. Super excited to do it. Wake up really excited every single day to get to work and kind of see what the day unfolds. So my parents, and then last but not least, so Mike Tagliere, obviously passed away a couple of years ago, no longer with Fantasy Pros, but I got to interact with him and meet with him on a couple different occasions, whether it was at some of the expos, offsites. It was actually, I got to meet him in Nashville. Because I knew he was there for one of the NFL drafts. I believe it was the 2019 NFL draft with Kyler Murray, and I met Tags there and got the opportunity to just like pick his brain about certain things. Like at the time, again, I wasn't at PFF yet at that time. I was just trying to pick his brain about like what do I have to do to get into the industry? How do I break in? And he just really offered a lot of great advice and confidence and someone that I knew I could go to and ask questions about, like, what's it like to work in the industry? Like, what are salary expectations? Like, how do you know your worth? Like, that matters, especially in a field like fantasy where it's not like you can't just like go on Glassdoor and be like, right, fantasy football analyst salary. What is that? Like, it's a very like complicated, like, it's not, you can't just find it on Glassdoor, essentially. It's not like a marketing job or an administrative job. It's very niche, even as the content continues to grow, especially with betting now, also kind of another layer on to the fantasy side of things, which I love. Again, giving us more avenues to talk about fantasy and football from different perspectives. I absolutely love that. And that's something that I've also have enjoyed doing the last year, really. I'm from Massachusetts. If you couldn't tell with all my Patriots love, from Massachusetts, still live here now. And they just legalized gambling, sports gambling last year. So that's something that I've been able to kind of take part in for the first time. And it's kind of like opened my eyes to other aspects of how you can digest football and how you can analyze and look and watch the game. And that's been really fun for me. So, yeah. So those are some of my main influence. Again, there's many more people that have been influential to me. My fiance wife will be in June. So super excited about that. But she's been very, I mean, it's not easy to, because I had to basically reset my career at a point in 2020 to go work at PFF, take less money to kind of chase my dream. And not everyone is always about that or has to be supportive about that. Like you're sacrificing money and it's like, well, is she going to wait for me? And not to say that, I mean, we had some tough conversations. I'll just leave it at that. Like we had tough conversations, but I knew at the time I was like, this is my shot to kind of go after it. And I got to go full force. And she was like, and our relationship was at a point where she was behind me 110%. And that's when I knew. That's when I knew she was the one for me. So, but
well, congratulations, and I'm glad we got you on now and not like in June where things are going to be really busy. So good.
Oh no, exactly. That's why no. She's like, oh, do you want to get married in June or September? I'm like, let's do June. Let's do June. That sounds good.
Yeah. So not July and August, and those are out of it. Yeah, we're out of it. Kind of warm, but not too warm. Yeah, and my wife and I we got married in September, so you definitely understand that sentiment. And Jamie saying a statement that I've heard echoed a ton. But just talk about Mike Tagliere and what an awesome guy he was. Jamie says he took time out of his day to give me personal advice via messages, and I feel like I don't even have to read that from Jamie. I'm sure everyone has that same sentence in mind. It seemed like he was put an emphasis on the fact that he was creating content for people, and the people who were either listening to the podcast or just following him on Twitter. He it made it seem like he really thought it was important to give back to all of them just with time, like Jamie's saying, giving the time to make detailed messages and really excellent feedback. Because I don't know if you get a ton of fantasy football questions, but it feels like the best way to answer people's questions is with more questions. Okay, unless the first message is so detailed that it has everything you need to know about it, but generally, okay, if I'm going to go dive into this, I'm going to need to know these few things, and I guess that's also part of the content creation space, but also understanding like who are the people that are doing that and are being detailed. If they're asking you questions to your questions, that means they really do care. It feels like Tags was definitely like that. Everyone who's ever talked about Mike Tagliere has never said a single bad word. It seems like he was just the nicest person, and that was just his genuine way of being. So it wasn't really effort for him to just be as super nice and generous with his time as possible, because it just seems like that's who he was.
For sure.
Yeah, so some great people you mentioned in terms of your influences. And I was going to say something else. I forgot it, but you know what? It's better to talk about Mike Tagliere than whatever random silly idea I was going to come up with. I guess we'll just get to the next question, which is your favorite hobbies outside of football or outside of fantasy football and the stuff you do with fantasy pros and betting pros. You can bet on it. Sure that those stuff keep you busy, but
Yeah. So for me, other hobbies, I like lifting weights. I like exercising in general. I think that kind of just like that's my go-to part of my daily routine, whether it's lifting weights, cycling, getting outside. I mean, it's been like 70 degrees here today in Boston. It's been like fantastic. Like I just like it's like my body's like I have to go outside. Like it's like non-negotiable. Like need to get outside in some way when we come out of the winter, which is always horrible. So I hate New England, but it makes you appreciate the times when it is nice out, because you're like, we don't get these all the time. It's probably gonna rain tomorrow, so we got to take advantage of it now. So yeah, outdoors, I like that. And then comes like media. I mean, like everybody else, I like movies, I like TV, video games. And at this age, I don't like to necessarily go out and, like club necessarily unless it's like a bachelor party. So I like going to breweries, tasting craft beers. I'm not a huge IPA guy, but I've been told by many IPA experts that you just got to keep trying them. You know, just like riding a bike, you can't give up. Eventually, you'll find one that kind of sticks, and you'll be like, okay, like this isn't bad. So trying to be more open minded to IPAs, even though I don't like them. More of a sours, stouts, everything else basically except IPAs. But that's kind of something I like to do. Like go to a craft brewery. There's a lot of nice ones in around the Boston area, and it's something I like to do with my friends. Like chilling on a Saturday, nice day. Get some. Well, I don't have a dog, but if I had a dog, I'd get the dog. We'd go to a craft brewery. We chill outside in the sun, have a sour, talk football. Yeah, that's like an ideal Saturday for me, and with some food. But ideally a taco truck. Ideally a taco truck.
I mean, if you really wanted, you could like buy a leash and pretend to have a dog. It's an invisible
this is my
dog.
leash for my dog that I would have if I could have one. Can't have
No,
one
it's
right
invisible.
now.
It's an invisible dog. Don't step on it.
His name is Casper, the dog.
Perfect. There you go. And then there's no need to explain any further than that. But you might have to explain a little bit on this. What is something that people in the fantasy community don't know about you and that you're willing to share?
So I think that I don't think everyone knows. I know some of my closer coworkers know this, but I mentioned I'm into lifting. So I used to be a competitive bodybuilder very early on in my 20s. So I was into the training, the cutting, the losing the weight, the 6 meals a day, all that stuff, the posing, the speedo, all that stuff. Did all of it. Have no interest in doing it anymore right now, but I've also lost significant amount of weight since those days, like 30 pounds, which glad it's in that direction versus the other direction, to be honest. I'd rather lose weight so I can always get it back, especially as I get older. So yeah, but I was just that was all I did. And when I look back at some of those pictures, I'm like, man, just like where did that part of my body go? I'm just like it's like my especially my like trunk area, so like my shoulders, my neck area was just like so thick, and it's like oh my god, like I was yolk sauce, like essentially is like what I'm looking at. So again, reflecting on it, it's like, man, but that's all I did. I was like, I went to work and ate food and went to the gym. Like, that's literally all I did. I did nothing else except eat, lift, and go to work. And that was it. And now, obviously, I do other things. So,
And if you're doing fantasy football at the time, you would have been, and this is shout out to Jamie, who sometimes contributes for them, but you'd have been a true fantasy six pack for the opposite reason of what they're saying with the beers. Although it seems you
yeah.
enjoy the brews.
So, Jamie's saying that he knew that I was a bodybuilder. So, I've already been outed.
So Joe apparently
Joe
gave that away in part of the debate. So, which again, Jamie hinted at earlier. So that's very, very clairvoyant of Jamie to know.
But
that
again, the thing with bodybuilders you have to keep in mind is we just look strong. We're not actually strong.
And to be fair, being strong and knowing how to fight are two different things as well.
That's also true.
I don't know how to do either.
I don't know how to fight. Full disclosure. I don't know how to fight either. So not only am I not strong anymore, I also don't know how to fight. So take that with what you will.
Maybe I will take Jamie up on that bet. Again, betting pros. Yeah, you know all about it. But I guess we'll talk about the fantasy football questions now. And of course, the fun part of the episode. We love fantasy. But what is your preferred league format for fantasy football?
Superflex. I just think that it adds that extra layer that you want with quarterbacks. I think quarterback streaming is kind of like just like an easy way to approach it, and I think that Superflex makes that you can't do that anymore. Like you actually have to draft good quarterbacks and like enter the draft with a strategy, and then with like scoring. I mean, best ball for me. Like I'm so over like having good guys go off on my bench. Like that just sucks for everybody. Like, but if it's best ball, like you get those points, like you get credit. Like I should be rewarded because I had this guy on my bench. Like, and it's not because, oh, well, we should have started him. It's like, well, what if my entire team is stacked? Like, it's not my fault I have too many good players. Like, I shouldn't be penalized for having such a good team. You know what I mean? And I guess, like, you could look at it as like, well, if your team is all good, like, it doesn't matter who you start. It's like, that's fair. But when a guy rips off an 80-yard touchdown, and I know he's on my bench because I couldn't start him, but I knew he was good, like, I want to get points for that. So, best ball, I think that's, especially with, like, being in, like, a bazillion different leagues, best ball is, I really don't join leagues anymore that aren't best ball specifically.
And I guess that goes for both redrafted Dynasty if you do.
Yeah, especially Dynasty. I think Dynasty best ball drafts are really underrated because it helps you just hyper focus on the draft, like off-season moves, trades, which is like the fun part of Dynasty versus like, oh, I got to set my lineup. That's like kind of the least favorite thing about fantasy, I think, at times. Like it takes time. Can be annoying. Like you said, like you're tilting your face off because you started the wrong guy. It's like the maneuvers, the transactions, the manager mode is actually like the fun part. So, and drafting the team.
I actually do like setting lineups, but I'm a weirdo like that.
Stop, Kyle. Stop. No one does. You can't tell me you like going through all 12 of your teams Sunday morning and be like, this is fun.
Well, I usually do it Saturday to make it more fun. That way I'm not as rushed and pressured. Sunday morning, I find, is usually just for, okay, that's where making sure like everyone's playing. But I've usually, every decision I'm making Sunday morning, I've already thought through on a Saturday. I have no life. So
I'm still trying to recover.
Fantasy stuff extends from Sunday morning through.
I'm still trying to recover from all my my sours that I've drank during the day. So I don't have time to get to that. By Saturday night, I'm out by 7 p.m. Gotta get up early for Sunday morning for the Adam Schefter bomb with like the 12,000 guys he talks about being injured.
Yeah, that's true. And then we can all talk about what he said on all our shows Sunday mornings on our streams. 25 plus teams. It's annoying. What are you saying, Jamie? Starting lineups? Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, yeah. When you get her a certain number, it becomes more of a. I mean, like Tuesday nights for me, it's like, sorry, babe, can't hang out. Gotta hit waivers. Like
I do find waivers to be more tedious than setting lineups because to me, lineups, like waivers, I could literally have to go through every player, whereas at least lineups, okay, this is the team. I just have to make from these decisions.
Yeah, it's more
like drafting. Yeah. I kind of find an extension of drafting. Like you make one decision to roster the player, you got to make another decision to start them every week. So kind of always taking that in stride. But yeah, it seems like I'm definitely the weirdo of the group that loves setting lineups. So I guess not so best ball is clearly maybe this answer for this, but is there anything else in terms of a rule that you feel you must have in your league?
Well, part of this kind of goes into what I've been talking about, like multiple flexes. So like, okay, you don't have to necessarily go all best ball, but I want to start more players so I don't have to run into situations where I can't start all the players I want. So I think that is a way. So like, if you don't want to move to all best ball for your leagues, just add more flexes. Like, why do we have all these bench spots? That's lame. Like, score more points. More points is fun. More players is fun. Get credit for your points. Like, I'd rather have all starting positions like 2 bench spots than like 8 bench spots and 4 start, like whatever. Like, start more guys.
8 and 8, like if it was a true.
Yeah. So yeah, I like less. I like deep rosters, but it's like I want more guys I can start every single week. Now, the only issue it comes with is like bye weeks, but everybody has to deal with it. And I think it's kind of fun. It's like, oh, I got to start this random guy on a bye week, like fingers crossed. And then if he goes off, you feel like a genius. You're like, let's go. So
And the idea of okay, especially if the bench isn't so deep, you have tough decisions to make. Do I keep this player or not?
Yeah.
And that can also, again, making decisions, forcing managers to make decisions, I think is never a bad thing. Jamie saying start 11 and 12 compared to start 8 and 9. I'll agree with that. Anything double digit number of starters, I think is where I'd like to be ideally. Agreed. Especially fewer teams. Like I've got a 10-team league and we start 12, and that doesn't feel, because there's only 10 of us, doesn't feel like that's too much. Like we could even go to 13 or even 14, and it's still.
Yeah, the last thing you want is like waivers to just be like loaded. Like that's like, yeah.
There's no incentive for anyone to kind of bid on any player if they know that, oh, I just pick up for free tomorrow an amazing player. Like,
right.
You also don't want it to be too sparse to where it's meaningless. Like there's no one good at all. Like, and that sometimes happens more in Dynasty than it will in redraft. In Dynasty, you get that where waivers are almost meaninless. So you really it does make those rookie picks though all the more important, because that's the only way you can add players to your team, because you rarely ever can pick up anyone of note. But the next few players we're talking about, I guess could be considered waiver wire pickups at some point. But who are your all-time fantasy QB1, RB1, wide receiver 1, and tight end 1?
All right, so we'll go rapid fire here. So Cam Newton, quarterback for me. His MVP season was just electric. So I remember drafting him as my backup that year, and God, he was much more than a backup. Jamal Charles, I had him in a ton of teams. Kind of got onto him like before he hit that massive stretch of season where he was unstoppable. Calvin Johnson, mentioned him earlier. Felt like I was an earlier adopter of Calvin Johnson, so special place in my heart for Megatron. And then a tight end, I mean, obviously, again, you could talk about Gronk or Travis Kelce, more recent, but for me, it was always Antonio Gates. This is he was the tight end. Every year, I was oh, when are you going to draft Antonio Gates when are you going to draft Antonio Gates? So I know that most people, especially the younger audience, is it's always been Travis Kelce is the tight end 1. But before that, Antonio Gates, he had a stretch where he was always tight end 1. So that would be my Mount Rushmore, I think. QB, receiver, running back, and tight end.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone describe it as the Mount Rushmore, but there are 4 players, so it actually fits perfectly.
I was hoping that I was wait, Mount Rushmore has 4 people, right? I was oh my God, did I just mess up? I was do I need to add a kicker? Oh my God, no, a defense.
They can always add another face on too. I suppose you could remove a face, not to deface Mount Rushmore, but it's there's a stretch, I guess, between 2011 and 2015 where you could have had that entire team on your roster: Cam Newton, Jamal Charles, Calvin Johnson, and Antonio Gates. And I wonder if the rounds would have worked out some of those years where you actually could have legit drafted all 4 of them and had them on a team.
Wow.
I don't know. Do you remember ever having all 4 of them?
I mean, I don't think so. That'd be sick though if I could find that team.
All right, the dream team. I guess your version of the dream team.
My version of the dream team, not that Eagles dream team. That team sucked.
It's funny because I was just thinking about that the other day.
Well, that was the thing that was funny about that was it was Vince Young, who was the backup quarterback, that said it was the dream team. Not even a guy that starts, but it's we're so good. If our starting quarterback goes down, I'll come in and we'll be nasty. And it's couldn't have been farther from the truth.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they made the playoffs. They were a 10-win team, I think.
I don't think they were. I thought they were a disaster.
See, I thought it was 2010, the 2010 season, and they actually won the division, but then lost in the wild card round to the Packers. I thought that was
the next year that they were the dream team. I feel like that was the year that they were the dream team because they reloaded. Because I remember I was obsessed with taking Michael Vick so high in fantasy because all I could think about when someone asked me about Michael Vick and the Eagles was that Monday night game against the Washington at the time Redskins, and Vic just opened up with an 80-yard touchdown to Deshaun Jackson on Monday night. It was oh my God, this guy's unstoppable. And then he was horrible the next year. So
Okay, yeah, because I guess I fondly remember the Dream Team because every time I hear the Dream Team, I think of how it ended. Oh yeah, to the Packers en route to their Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Maybe I just
Yeah. So
misremember
yeah,
that,
it
so I
was
can think of the
it was
Packers winning the
2011.
Super Bowl
Yeah.
when I think of the Dream Team. Great, good job, Brain. Way to misassociate there. Apparently, Jamie used to associate with Antonio Gates. They went to college together at Kent State. So Jamie, once an episode will throw in some like crazy life story. Usually they're pretty like wild. This is a tame life story, but it's pretty incredible. So kudos to you, Jamie. The Jamie saga continues even after his press coverage episode last week. He hasn't revealed all. Stay tuned. Every going for two live episode, which is basically every night of the week. Jamie's in there commenting, and he'll always throw something crazy wild that's just worth just to watch the comments, not even the great content that, of course, is on screen and coming through the microphone. But yes, we get to the high five section of the show. So Andrew's top five players, or it's not top. We just did players. Top five for five different categories, and so we're going to start off the high fives with top five artists or bands.
All right. So this is a pretty diverse group because I just like a lot of different types of music. So
Love
Blink
that.
182, AC/DC, Justin Bieber, The Clash, and Duran Duran. So it's pretty much all over the place, but I have a very diverse music palette, and I listen to different music depending on what I'm doing, my mood, and yeah, I try to embrace all types of music.
I mean, technically, three of those bands would be considered punk bands, but yet, even within the punk rock sphere, they do sound quite different, all three of each other. But to be honest, I love the Clash, and I love how they set the standard for a lot of different things that come with again the punk rock territory, and like they were in on the sort of reggae ska stuff right
Yeah.
from their first album, and then when the '90s hit and punk rock kind of became a thing, they also started associated with the ska reggae scene. Like both those scenes kind of became a thing, but like man, the Clash was doing that like almost 20 years before, so well ahead of their time. But they were also pretty successful in their own time, so people could appreciate just how good they were. And yes, I call it every Canadian on the show. I was hoping to avoid this one, but Jamie inevitably mentioned that Justin Bieber is Canadian. Yes, he's from. He and I are from the same country. Just kidding. I like some of his songs. Yeah, clearly Andrew loves Justin Bieber. So yeah, very very diverse, and also diverse from the times, right? Like you're talking '80s with Duran Duran, even '70s with the Clash, and even AC/DC, to some artists that have come out in the post millennium. So yeah, it's great. I love hearing people with diverse set of musical tastes because I feel like even like I think of like punk rock versus metal. And I love both those scenes, but it's crazy to me that back in the day they would almost like despise each other, especially in the '70s, '80s. The metalheads would diss the punk rock because you guys barely play your instruments, and then the punk rockers, it's like all you do is ride around on bikes or whatever they would say about them. It's pretty. It's not really that great of an insult. It sounds pretty badass. Oh, you're just a cool biker. Oh, wait, I didn't insult them there. But the whole idea of like, oh, you can only like metal or punk, I always thought was strange. And then expand that further. You can't. It's not just rock versus everything else. It's we can enjoy all sorts of different music. It's all about the harmony and wanting to be in harmony with what we're listening to, but also I guess what we're reading. So, Andrew, what are your top five books?
So I like I don't really read a ton. A lot of stuff I read is actually like self-help books or more like self-improvement books. So some of the ones I read recently, Why We Sleep, Atomic Habits, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Bleep. I really enjoyed that book. So those are kind of like the self-help books that I've read recently that I felt like had really good messages about the ways that you can improve your life and do certain things and approach things differently. As opposed to like more like novels, like I mean Harry Potter. I've read all the books. I enjoyed reading all the books. I remember my dad would like went to one of the midnight openings for a book. Like imagine that, like a midnight opening for a book. But he did. So and then
Do
and
you remember which book? Which
I think it
specific?
was the I think he actually did for both of that. The both either I think it was like the fifth and sixth books because I felt like there was like a gap in time between the first four books and then books 5, 6, and 7. Yeah, because there's two
There's
Deathly
8
Hollows
movies, but only
movies.
7 books.
Yeah, 7 books. So yeah, and that was when I was like elementary school, middle school. The Fantasy Black book, also a great read. Shout out to Joe Pisapia for setting that up every year. And then my last thing, I guess I'm cheating a little bit because it's a comic book or it's a comic strip. It's Calvin and Hobbes. Was a sucker for Calvin and Hobbes growing up, and to this day, like I have like a stack of them in my office, and I just like every once in a while I'll kind of peek over and just like want a little chuckle that's not coming from social media. Calvin and Hobbes, that'll give it to you.
You get the same chuckles as social media, maybe not as much grief.
Yeah, no, exactly. Exactly.
Much less risky proposition.
Without the chance of any type of doom scrolling. No chance of doom scrolling when you're just reading Calvin and Hobbes.
Unless the comics about them doom scrolling. I don't know if they got that far into their development. But yes, honestly, did Jamie answer Fantasy Black Book on his episode? I know that was just a month ago. I already forgot. But yeah, Jamie, I definitely love asking all these questions to people just to see what mediums and media people like. But we'll go with top 5 movies now.
Yeah, so I only have 3. I was doing this off the cuff like yesterday when I was kind of preparing, and I was like, I couldn't really think of any that were like deserving of my top 5. So I probably do have other ones, but for now I'll just list the ones that to me are just very iconic. So 21 Jump Street with Jonah Hill. Love that movie. Shrek. I'm a Shrek head. Think it's a great movie. And then The Dark Knight is by far my I don't even really think it's a superhero movie. I think it's it's so much better as just like a film. Like I don't even like classify it really as like a superhero movie per se, even though it is Batman. I feel like it offers so much. So The Dark Knight. So that's 3. And I feel like every other movie kind of just falls into like a trickle of movies. Like it'd be like 4 through 20 would be my next top option. So, but those 3 kind of separate themselves a little bit for me.
Fantasy Pros ranker, but also understanding that tiers are probably more important than rankings.
Hell yeah.
And to be fair, all 3 of those movies that you mentioned are part of series, so you could easily just say, okay, Shrek 2 is in there, and then Batman Begins. There you go. There's 5, and yeah, all fantastic series to be honest. But to your point with Dark Knight, I've often said it's the best superhero movie, but it almost feels like it does transcend the genre.
Yeah,
it's a great
it's not
genre action movie.
Yeah, I really think it's like. Yeah, I feel like it can be grouped together with not because it's hard to break out of that. Like if you're a superhero movie, like you're clumped together with every other superhero movie, that's what you're compared to. Makes sense, but just the fact that there's nobody even has superpowers in that movie. Like I think it's just great.
Jamie's also got a 6th sense for this because he did mention you when talking about the Black Book. Yeah, that's true. Obviously, you mentioned Joe, and Joe's created this for so many years. But I think he went through some of the people who contribute, and I do believe your name was mentioned.
Yep.
And I either transitioned that to say, "Oh, Andrew's coming on next month," or I didn't. I can't remember which happened. I'm going to assume I did just to pat myself on the back, but it probably wasn't. I tried to. I tried to plug this as much as I could. But yeah, I guess we'll get to top 5 game day foods.
Yeah, so we're gonna go with wings, buffalo chicken dip, tacos / nachos. So just like some type of a Mexican du jour, sliders, and sausage and peppers as like a one component dish.
That almost sounds like it could be like a complete potluck kind of meal, and it would all go well together.
Yeah, I'm trying. It's like I have a limited stomach space. And it's like, all right, we got to figure out how to do this optimally. And that's why I like tacos and sliders specifically because they're smaller versions of larger entrees essentially, but you can get different flavors and tastes of it in just smaller increments. So it helps you get more flavor. So it's like, oh, this place has a bunch of good burgers, but I can only get one. Well, if you order sliders, you can try each type of burger in a small. Same thing with tacos. So that's why I love those smaller finger foods.
Especially if you're going to a place for the first time before you commit to, okay, I'm just going to get this one thing. That does make sense. A lot of logic there. Well thought out. And we'll finish with top 5, going from game day to video games. That transition didn't seem as smooth as I thought it would. But, smoothly get into this. Andrew, what are your top 5 favorite video games?
Yeah, so I didn't even really think about this one. I just went for the first 5 that came to my mind. So if I know I'm probably forgetting one that's super iconic to me, but it unfortunately didn't make the list. But I do have 5. So Mario Kart, Pokemon, Guitar Hero, Madden, and Smash Brothers or Super Smash Brothers. So those 5 franchises, probably 50% of my childhood, at least, if not more. So for example, I didn't say Mario Party. Like that would probably be one that would be like 6. One of the next ones. And I mean, when you look at this list, is there anything that you think I'd be missing? Like I didn't really play a lot of Call of Duty when I was growing up, so that wouldn't be on it for me. But like Guitar Hero, like played that game so much Madden, of course, the football background, and then from the Nintendo franchises, like those were the 3 I definitely played the most.
It also seems like you got a good variety. You got a sports game, a silly racing game, because I just want to say it's like a racing game that takes itself too seriously.
Oh
There's a lot of
yeah.
fun with everything, which makes Mario Kart so fun. It almost like transcends the racing game genre, almost for the opposite reason of why Dark Knight transcends the comic book genre. Both are excellent though. Yeah, Jamie loves Mario Kart too. So I don't know if there's anything missing. I was actually gonna dive further into, because some of those are series as well that you mentioned, like Madden. Did you ever have a favorite version of Madden? Did you ever think there was a year they captured something they never were able to reproduce?
Yeah, no, the first Madden game I ever had was Madden 05. The introduction of the hit stick. Ray Lewis was on the cover. And I remember it was kind of like the first moment that I realized I liked football. It like connected in my head. We were at recess and my school, so I must have been like, I think I was like in 5th grade or 4th grade, and it was like a snow day. So we couldn't use like the playground. So basically, instead of us like going on the playground, they just sent us out into like the parking lot to just like gallivant or whatever and do whatever, 5th graders and 4th graders do. So someone brought a football, right? And so people were playing football and I just started playing with them. It's the first time I played, and nobody was covering me because they didn't see me as a threat, right? But what they didn't know is I actually had hands, and I just kept catching everything because no one covered me, because the quarterback was like, "Oh, I'll just throw it to Andrew," and I was like, "Sick." And then the next day, so same thing. So I'm all hyped up. I'm like, "Oh, it's gonna be sick." So we're doing the same thing. Next day they cover me though. I'm like, damn, I need to get some more moves. So like I convinced my parents, like, Dad, like I need to learn more about football. Like, let's go get Madden. So that was like the first Madden game I got after an experience like in the
Well sold
schoolyard.
on why, like, because your
Yeah, because I
parents
was like,
love football, so I
yeah,
want to learn with this video game.
yeah, I want to
Damn,
learn with this video game. And
how could
I
they
mean,
say
yeah,
no?
I definitely logged like so many hours in franchise mode with that game, like to a point where I'm sure other people that have played enough Madden where like you've done a franchise for so long that none of the actual players are even left. You're just like onto all like create players that the game just automatically generates like every single season when you do a draft. Um, and yeah, like Madden 05 for me, GameCube, Ray Lewis was on the cover, and yeah, definitely the most iconic. And again, I played other ones, had other versions, but that one was definitely the most iconic to me. And I remember just never, I would miss so many tackles because I would just use the hit stick all the time. But I was like, I'd rather miss 15 tackles than miss an opportunity to blow up this quarterback or blow up this, like, especially with the graphics back then, when you would decleat somebody, they would like friggin' flip over and their arms would bend backwards in ways that no human body should ever move.
Thank God it's just a video game.
Yeah, right. So, but yeah, Madden 05
Madden
was my
05
my
specifically.
go-to.
Yeah, nice. Jamie says Madden 07. Like, I played the, again, Canadian, so I played the NHL games, and I found I got NHL 2003. It wasn't the first one I had gotten, but up to that point I thought it was the best. And then, okay, I think a couple years later I bought 2005, and I hated it. I was like, you know what? Forget this. I'm never gonna buy another one. I'm just gonna play 2003. So I found, like, I find that with sports games, there's always one that for various reasons will stick out for people. And yeah, some of us go far back with, oh, they haven't made a good one in 20 years now, 21 years. I'm gonna yell at that cloud angrily. But no, this was no anger here, because this was a fantastic episode, Andrew. Thank you very much. I know Jeff loves to tease that I make these go like an hour and a half sometimes because I just babble on. We're not even at 50 minutes yet. We're about to hit 50. It'll be under an hour though, so Jeff will be happy. Dan can stop teasing me. You don't have to be too long away from your fiance. So everyone's happy here. Hope you enjoyed this, Andrew.
No, this was a great time. I love kind of coming on here and getting the chance to chop it up with someone that I've met from the past and talk about, old times, talk about my journey, reflect on it, and be like, man, like I made it this far. I want to keep going. So super happy, super pumped that you brought me on. I love the questions too. The top 5 ringer at the end, elite way to end a show. So keep that up, Kyle. And yeah, looking forward to the NFL draft. So correct. So you are from are you also Canadian? Is that what you were saying? Or is it just
Yeah,
Jamie?
I am. Yeah.
Where in Canada do you live?
So I live in Sudbury, Ontario.
Ontario. Okay, cool. I'm going to Canada at the beginning of May. I'm
Okay.
going to Montreal, but
Yeah, that's
yeah.
Canada. Some people in Quebec might not want to admit it, but it's in Canada. But yeah, cool. Yeah, Montreal's. I've actually never been to Montreal.
Okay.
But I know everyone who goes says how amazing it is. So I'm sure you'll have.
I heard that
blast
they
at
got good poutine. Poutine. Is that how you pronounce it? Whatever.
Poutine. You got the first part right, at least. But yeah, if you say poutine, they'll be really impressed with you.
Poutine.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm ready.
Yeah, you say it like that they'll still give it to you anyway if you pronounce it the other way, but they'll be happier to take your money and sell it to you. But yeah, so apparently Jamie thinks it's the best press coverage episode so far this year.
Boom.
Episode 2 this year.
Love that.
Jamie's being self-deprecating because again, he was the guest on the last episode. I thought both were fantastic. So I can't decide. It's like deciding your favorite
Favorite child,
favorite fantasy teams, but favorite child or favorite team build or favorite league win. I know actually the part of it is okay. We found out on the episode it was really good to bring you on this time of year, not June when you're getting married. But I also kind of wanted to do it before the NFL draft and just to end with a slight humble brag. Jeff doesn't do this anymore, but he used to do a DFS contest for the NFL draft, and each player would be priced a certain amount of money. And you had to kind of build a team, and based on how high they went in the draft, you got certain points from them. The last year he did it, you and I actually ended up being co-champions.
Oh yeah, I was like, wait, I remember this. Yeah,
Larry Roundtree getting drafted.
Oh yeah,
last
Larry
day tied me for you. Otherwise, if Larry Roundtree went undrafted, I think you would have won it, and I wouldn't. You would have had it solo, and I wouldn't have. So
still the highlight of Larry Roundtree's career.
Yeah, help me win that one or co-win that one draft DFS thing that was for charity. I don't believe he was won any money on it, but it was cool to. I'm competitive, so I just love winning. So that's why I wanted to brag about it anyway. But yeah, I thought, you know what, let's talk about it. And because the NFL draft's coming up, are you doing anything for Fantasy Pros during the NFL draft?
Yeah, so Fantasy Pros, myself, other analysts, Joe, Thor, Debro, the whole kick and caboodle, the whole gang, we're all doing 2 nights of live streams. So basically, Thursday night, 8 p.m. or kicking off things at 7 p.m. Draft starts at 8 p.m. Going live all night long, talking about the picks. Joe and Thor are going to be on the entire time. It's going to be me and Derek kind of like rotating in and out as we do some of the stuff behind the scenes. So yeah, live stream over on the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. And then when we're not on the channel itself, we'll be chiming into the YouTube channel with comments, kind of just like, pushing the bear, especially depending on where JJ McCarthy goes, because that's Thor's guy and he really wants him to be a Minnesota Viking, but who knows? He may be a New England Patriot when it's all said and done. So we don't know. Excited about it, but yeah, that's where we're going to be on Thursday night, Friday night, and then Saturday. I'm going to be working on my draft guide or the draft grades. Excuse me. I'm going to be all draft out by then, but draft grades. And then Sunday is my fiance's bridal shower. So it's a jam-packed 4 days. I'm going to be just dedicated to football all Saturday. I'd be like, hey, I have to work on Saturday, but don't worry. Like, I'll be focused for Sunday for the shower, even though all I do is show up with flowers. It's not all that I do, but it's a big part of the job.
Don't tell her that. You got to make it seem more important.
Don't worry. She only listens to some of the shows that I'm on. So we should be good.
Yeah, 53 minutes in, she might not go right to the end if she watches this one.
But yeah, no, super excited about the NFL content. So yeah, it's over on fantasypros.com. Betting Pros, we're going to be doing our favorite bets for the NFL draft as well. So it's all going to be featured. So I would subscribe now anywhere you get your podcasts. And yeah, go subscribe on the YouTube channel as well. So you set that notification so you know when we go live.
Awesome. And Go Over 2 Live will also be doing some stuff draft day, but not to compete with what Fantasy Pros is saying. I'll just plug the Saturday show, which I'll be hosting probably from, I think last year we started at 12 noon and went till, I think basically Brian Ford actually ended up finishing the show along Josh. They basically went right into Dynasty Saturday Night 5 show, which they normally do Saturday night. It basically turned out to an extended episode of that. So it was several hours on Saturday, but yeah, of course we'll be doing some things on Thursday and Friday as well. But yeah, watch Saturday because that's when everything we'll know everything. Well, maybe not quite at the start. still be wondering where, hopefully not wondering where the RB1 is going at that point. Blake Watson.
That would be great. No running back gets drafted on day 2. Oh, people will be sweating.
Well, no, I'm saying I think the RB1 in the class is Blake Watson, but he might not actually go in the first 2 days. So hot take there from me. Just to end with that. So again, hey, we won the co-won the NFL draft DFS contest. I think we know a thing or two about predicting draft capital. But anyway, Andrew, this is awesome. Thank you so much, and thank you, the listeners and viewers. Anything you want to say before we leave?
Yeah, no, just follow me over on the X Machine at Andrew Erickson _, and I'm over on Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros.
Awesome. Yeah, appreciate it, Andrew. Jamie, appreciate you in the chat, and anyone who's watched or listened. Also appreciate all of you. My name is, once again, Kyle Senra, and next month, don't have the guest lined up yet, but stay tuned to find out who will be the guest during the May episode of Press Coverage in due time. Okay, and yeah, one last comment from Jamie. Says, awesome show. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Andrew. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Andrew. And enjoy, everyone. Have a good night, and thank you all for watching another episode of Press Coverage.